We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happened.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You loudest black man!
It is episode 74 of College Sports Follow the Money, along with Dr. Bowen Loftin and Jon Heidtke. I'm Andrew Monaco. collegesportsftm@gmail.com if you have a question that we can answer for you in an upcoming episode. Good to be back with both of you. Wonderful to be along for this episode.
It's been a busy time for all of us. There's so much going on right now in the athletics world of colleges that I've been pretty busy watching and reading and thinking about college sports for the last few weeks since our last get-together, gentlemen.
Well, never a dull moment in March Madness, and I think it's taken on a new definition this time around. So we'll try to cover some of those topics. So, yeah. I think March Madness is now entire year madness when it comes to college sports.
There's no downtime in college sports. That's where there used to be dead periods. Not any longer. And as you said, the madness will now be on the sidelines by players who will celebrate after these next two big days, the Saturday and the Monday in San Antonio. Also on the sidelines for some coaches. We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk about the transfer portal for a women's basketball player at a very successful program who's not going pro. She's going to stay in college. It's not going to be at her previous college. Still to come, though, are those topics. We want to talk, Dr. Loftin. We'll start in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and they had a settlement. We know that in some years past, after Florida State did not get into the college football playoff, angry at the conference, there were some lawsuits there. Clemson also as well. Is the Atlantic Coast Conference steady now, Dr. Loftin, or is this just détente and kicking the can down the curb, so to speak?
I think the proper term here is for the near future, and whatever near means. We have reasonable stability right now. Where that lasts to 2036 is another matter. I won't speculate too much on that right now, but what we do know is this: there's been those two schools you mentioned, Clemson and Florida State, have grumbled for a while about what they're thinking of in terms of what they deserve versus what they get in the ACC. And the grant of rights that was done a while back by that conference froze essentially, or determined the revenues that they had under their existing model for revenue sharing. There was a tweak a little while back to try to make them happier, which didn't go far enough. But in late 2023, Florida State sued the the ACC rather, and in early 2024, Clemson followed suit. They filed their suits in their own state's courts, which I think was significant and gave a lot of pause to the ACC about the success they might have of fighting those. They countersued, of course, as you might expect. But over the last many weeks, they have worked hard on trying to find a common ground and seem to have arrived at that right now. The model they have is sort of twofold. There is more revenue for the two schools in question. It's being achieved by what's called a brand initiative that allows them to decide on the distribution of 60% of their revenue each year to the schools based on their ratings in a 5-year rolling average. It's not just about football. It's 75% football, but also 25% basketball. And so you have a pretty complex set of rules here to follow, but still certainly calculable. The other 40% will go out equitably to the schools. So that will make a big change, basically. If you look at what was said when the lawsuits were filed, in particular, the Florida State people said it could cost them $700 million in cash and lost revenue to leave the conference in the old model. That's maybe an exaggeration, but it gives you an idea of how costly it would be with both the exit penalty and the fact that under those rules, the rights remained owned by the ACC. So you paid a penalty to get out, a big one, but then they still owned your rights till 2036. The new model, besides the brand initiative I just mentioned in terms of how we distribute the money, basically says if you do buy out, then you take your rights with you. The buyout starts out at a fairly high number. The buyout starts out at $165 million for the fee to buy out, and it decrements $18 million a year, reaching a plateau of $75 million in 2030-31. So they have starting out at a very high level of your penalty, and it decreases rather rapidly to what is a more basically called normal or reasonable penalty. But in any case, going forward, when you leave and pay the penalty, whatever it might be, you get to keep your rights. And that was not true under the previous model they had. So that's a biggie, in my opinion, right there. This revenue sharing idea is not exactly new with them. If you recall the Big 12, John,
yes.
Remember those days you and I were playing together in that particular conference? Half of the money in the Big 12 they received as revenue went equally to the schools, but the other half was divided up based on TV appearances. And you were the guru. You were the Fox, Southwest guy, and so you're the primary place our games were played, and the revenue you provided was our primary source of income at the conference level. And so we had a distribution then which was unequal. I'm not sure if you care about this, but while I was a member of that conference on its board of directors, I fought to change that model. I felt that the instability of the conference was in part due to the inequality. And I tried to get that changed in the bylaws. And we decided to leave to go to the SEC before that happened. And it finally did happen in a way, except that new schools coming in took a hit. So after Missouri and Texas A&M left, the conference tried to add some more schools in, obviously, and the new schools took hits early on. So even though they tried to move to an equitable distribution for the old members, the new members weren't equal. I referenced the Big Ten and the ACC both. Both of those are doing some things, especially the ACC, about new memberships as far as how soon those schools will get money. How long will SMU wait, my friends? How long will SMU wait to get any money out of the ACC? That's an interesting decision they made, which also speaks to the fact they've got some pretty good sized backers to help them out. But again, the model we have now for them is adjusting really the fee to get out, and distribution both. Now, my question for you two gurus, do you think this kind of a model, which has some connectivity to the past in the Big 12 certainly, does it offer anything to conferences that are going forward, especially conferences where you might find some degree of distribution, shall we say, popularity of their teams? Do you think that might affect them in some way?
Yes, it's inevitable.
I thought so. And
I
that's
think there's
why
too
I'm
many hard
saying,
feelings. You just said brand. So you're telling someone my brand is not worth as much as yours.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
exactly
why I said kick it down the curb. I think you're just gonna have sore feelings. It's just going to be in a different calendar year.
That's why I said when you asked the first question, guys, how long will this create stability? The optimist says in the near term, thinking years, at least 5 years. It could be less than that, depending on what happens. One thing is interesting here: the distribution of this money under the new model would, according to Clemson, say they say they'll get $120 million more over the next 6 years than they would have gotten otherwise. That gives you some magnitude, but that doesn't even count the fact that there is also money involved in the CFP for them, depending on how far down that path you go, and that money. Clemson's had a record of getting into the playoffs quite a bit. And so they see some other revenue out there, which is unquantifiable right now, based on your getting into the CFP and how far down the pathway you go in that playoff. So it does make Clemson and probably Florida State happier. Make others happier? I'm guessing not. They probably did this just to preserve the conference. With the lawsuits going forward in state courts, you can imagine how that might have come out for the ACC.
Dr. Loftin, I think what gets lost is what you said earlier was where that lawsuit and where it started in each of the states, right?
It did, and that was very deliberate on their part. Their lawyers said, our best shot's a jury here in Florida or a jury in South Carolina. I got that, and certainly the ACC did too. They tried to get these things moved to federal court, and that move, as far as I can tell, failed. And so that led them to come to the table, sit down with these two schools particularly, and the other board members obviously had to be part of the equation there to work out a deal. But I can imagine sitting there as a Georgia Tech, for example, and just kind of gritting my teeth and saying, wow, we're giving away a lot of money to keep these two schools happy here. So there's some fairly good mid-range schools in the ACC like that. You can imagine others as well along the East Coast saying the same thing. And they have now a wider footprint than they had before. And the schools coming in from the outside are taking hits early on in some cases and for a long time in at least one case. And I don't know how you would feel about that. I think it's very difficult to say my brand is worth so much less than yours. Is it really?
Look, Boston College is in a bigger market, but Boston College doesn't register nationally through the ACC. Miami obviously will. Syracuse, because, look, there's a pipeline to ESPN for every PA that works there has been at Syracuse. But your Wake Forests, Duke football, things like that. Now, the 5-year period puts Clemson and Florida State in a great position, right? Because they've been the two programs. Now, going back to when Florida State was invited into the ACC, that was a big part of that because the Atlantic Coast Conference wanted Florida State and the power that it brought in football. What was that? Late 80s, early 90s, right? For that. But John, I mean, you could say, oh, you're on TV, but you might be on ACC Network and not on ESPN or ESPN2. That's not rated, correct? ACC Network's like the SEC Network. They're not rated. So you might be on. And I guess that 5-year period, John tells me, like Louisville could be good for 1 year. Pitt could be good for 1 year, but maybe not for 5 years. And it's still going to be lopsided to the programs that this conference seems to want to protect just to glue together.
Well, I think the key thing there was they were able to keep it together for a few more years. And so now that gives them some more time to hopefully, see what the landscape plays out. Everybody knows there's going to be more changing. They just don't know exactly when and where it's going to happen. So at least it gives them a little more stability for the next several years. But it also gives the other schools now time to prepare and plan for what their next strategy is going to be through this process. It's probably every member for themselves now at this point, not a whole lot of conference unity going on there. And again, how do they position themselves for the next round or the next wave when the next realignment shifts, which will probably be sometime before the 2030s or early 2030s, because that's when all your television deals start to come up. So I think that's when you'll see the next land rush through this process. And I think over that period of time, I think, again, it's put more credence into, as they look around and how do we solve these problems, that super conference idea or whatever nomenclature that takes at the end of the day probably is going to start to gain a lot more steam over the next, 12 to 18 months to 2 years. So I think you're going to see a lot of people as they try to figure out how do we do this? How do we sustain it? What is the house ramifications? What are the collectives going to do to get to as where they can generate revenue over and above that, that 20+ million for revenue share? All those things I think are going to come into greater focus over these next 18 months.
Well, John, let me ask this question. Are you thinking that there was any involvement by the TV folks in this particular discussion, this deal? Were they involved in any way in terms of pushing one way or the other as far as how this went?
I think most TV networks are going to say, no, they're not. This is the conference issue. We're your television partner. But I'm certainly think, again, they're going to probably ask them as our television partner, how do you view this? What do you look at? And I think there were certainly conversations how the ACC could generate more revenue opportunities through this process by, maybe tweaking how their TV is being done to try to create revenue. So I think those conversations are always ongoing, but I don't think a network would ever sort of dictate, we want this school, we want that school. At the end of the day, that's more, they leave that to the conference. But certainly, they want to make sure that their best brands are put in their best window so they can maximize their viewership when those games are being played. And are there other opportunities to enhance that scheduling mix so that you get a few more marquee games that you have to work with when those windows? Because back in the day, Dr. Loftin, you remember in the Big 12, we put the schedule together with television in mind. And if all of a sudden we picked Oklahoma State to be a game late November, and both teams weren't playing very well, and you had another great matchup that was gone, you don't have a time to adjust those types of things. I mean, the NFL has flex scheduling now, so they're able to do some things like that to move games around. But and I think the television networks, at the collegiate level, have that too. They have the 6-day and 12-day windows. But those things are all important, again, to drive that, put those best games in the best windows where they will bring those, 8, 10, 12 million potentially TV viewers on a regular basis. And again, I think we've looked at it. If you can do 4 million on an average, you're in a really good neighborhood there. So I think, again, those things are going to be happening. And I think, again, that if I'm Florida and Florida State, or I'm Florida State and Clemson, their brands are still going to carry them, even though their on the field performance may not over the next several years. But that brand is still important, as we've talked about on many times on this podcast.
Why didn't Miami get? Clearly, they have a brand that's very, very national in scope. Why didn't they get on the bandwagon with Florida State and Clemson?
My guess is there were a lot of people on the sidelines cheering on Florida State and Clemson through this process that didn't want to necessarily get dragged into the legal morass out there. If you guys are old enough to remember back in 1983 when the CFA was trying to break away from the NCAA because, again, the NCAA had warehousing a lot of great matchups, and an Oklahoma-Nebraska game was getting just as much money as the Lehigh-William and Mary game. They were trying to figure out which teams or which schools would potentially go take on that fight. Oklahoma and Georgia ultimately raised their hands, but they probably had another 150 schools behind there cheering them, because if you may remember, the NCAA was going to be very punitive to schools that were in that court case and potentially banning them for television appearances for time. But again, that was when the NCAA had a lot more teeth than they do today. But my guess is Miami, North Carolina, a couple of those others, Virginia, that are going to probably have a good home when this thing would all end. We're certainly may not want to get in the legal process, but we're certainly cheering those folks on.
And that's what we look forward to, right? John, what you said, that maneuvering, now it's going to be up to who leads the conference so that all of the ACC schools end up in this Super Division One. Again, don't know the nomenclature. Because then if that's the case, this is three monkeys trying to get on Noah's Ark and it starts raining, right? You're going to have all these schools trying to want to be, because if you're not in that Super Division One, life becomes very different on the collegiate level. To our next topic here on College Sports Follow the Money, Buzz Williams is now the head coach at Maryland. He's not the only coach to move this offseason. And really, this movement began with someone who walked away. I'm going to say it's when Tony Bennett left Virginia, which surprised an awful lot of people. Yeah. Jim Larrañaga stepped away from Miami earlier this season, but there have been some coaching changes. This won't be the only one, but as we touched on the top, it's that time of year where coaches are going to be changing sidelines. Buzz Williams, after 6 years at Texas A&M, is now a Terrapin at Maryland. Your thoughts?
Well, he was going to have $4.8 million a year pay at Texas A&M on the 1st of April when this all changed. The important thing is the buyout changed right then too. They waited, whoever you want to talk about, him or Maryland, waited till the very first day they could achieve a $1 million buyout. They just got $2 million from their coach who left them. And so they make money on the deal, basically. Now, we don't know yet. We haven't seen any details publicly yet of what the deal that Buzz will have at Maryland. So we don't know his pay there yet, but it'll be at least $4.8 million. I'm sure of that. He won't take a pay cut to go there. And Maryland's going to pay $1 million to Texas A&M to bring him in. We'll see if the promise is made. There were promises made apparently before the AD at Maryland left that there'd be more resources for basketball. Will that be true for Buzz Williams? We don't know the answer to that yet. But all eyes are turning to what? Search for a new basketball coach at Texas A&M and others, as you said.
It's like a domino effect. Kevin Willard goes to Villanova. Villanova opens because Kyle Neptune, who was an assistant to Jay Wright, took over, did not work as that was. I can tell you all that Jay Wright, you can throw his name out there. He's not going to coach again. He is just fine at CBS and Turner. It's because it has changed a little bit. But once again, John, then the dominoes start falling. Whoever Texas A&M hires, if that's someone similar to Rodney Terry leaves Texas. Oh, Sean Miller's at Xavier, who knocked out Texas. That's the coach they want. Indiana makes a change from West Virginia, all of that. It's a very interesting time. We play a lot of who is it? I guess we do that, but really your director of athletics is the only one who really knows who's on that list of coaches that you want to bring in.
So who's at Maryland? Who's the AD then?
Yeah.
There is none.
There is none, exactly.
There is none. And remember, Buzz, hired by Scott Woodward, inherited by Ross Bjork, and now Trev Alberts. He goes to a place that does not have an AD.
I'll take you back further. I'm sitting next to the chancellor, University of Maryland, at a meeting in Washington one day, and he has hired a man, or they've hired a man who came from Texas A&M, named Turgeon. And so he begins asking me questions about contracts. This guy had zero experience before he came to Maryland in terms of any athletic contracting at all. And he was sitting next to me who'd done a lot. And so we spent fair part of that meeting talking about how you deal with coaching negotiations, because he didn't understand the role of the AD versus the chancellor versus the coach, and where agents fit in and all kinds of things like that. So we had an interesting conversation for a while, guys.
Well, again, it just shows you the instability of this world. So again, Buzz is leaving to go to a place without an AD. Maybe he's probably used to that from his issues, but that does just seem to raise probably more questions than answers. So you'd hopefully go to an area. I mean, as much as everybody got going to tar and feather Schlossnagel, at least he had a relationship with Del Conte. That wasn't probably going. I mean, it wasn't surprising that he left. I think it was under the circumstances that he left was probably not the best way to leave and from one school to another. But that's the nature of the beast that we live in now, gentlemen.
No, I'm used to the fact that coaches come and go. You can't ignore that fact of nature. And, you don't like sometimes how it happens. Sometimes you got to fire people. I had to deal with firing Mike Sherman, who was a popular guy. I had to deal with hiring people that I thought weren't appropriate, but then I had bosses who thought they were. And, you try to make the best you can out of a deal like that. So I looked up one time, I did 85 coaching contracts during my times at Texas A&M and at the University of Missouri. So that gave me a lot of hard-won experience, gentlemen. A lot of stripes on the back.
Dr. Loftin, do you go through a search committee? Do you do it on your own? Can you give us a little bit of background? Not on all 85, but how that will work and how it applied to you?
I've done it both ways. I'm most fond of a very small, quiet search process that involves few people. I've learned the hard way, and you guys know this well, that athletics is a very leaky ship as far as information is concerned. The currency of many people in these departments is knowledge, information. They want to share, and that gives them some degree of credibility in their world. I can point to many examples of it happening to me. So I'll give you one example. When I hired the AD at University of Missouri, Mike Alden had been there for many years. I inherited him. Great guy, trained many ADs, very high integrity kind of guy. He just called me one day and said, I'm retiring. I was totally totally flummoxed by that because I didn't expect it. I had no idea. And so I'm immediately needing an AD. So what I decided to do then, rather than I was urged to form a committee, which I did not do, I simply contracted with a massive search firm that had one key person who knew everybody in the country who was available, basically. That's the key. And we started the search process. And I was trying to find someone who was in the SEC already. That failed. And so looking beyond the SEC, I discovered this guy, Mac Rhodes, at Houston. And so that's kind of where we zeroed in. I interviewed him personally, only I did that. So I've gone from one extreme, which is having me and one search person only doing the job, to working with my AD, like with hiring Kevin Sumlin. That was Bill Byrne was doing the day-to-day stuff. We were talking several times a day, so I knew where he was going down his list. Every good AD has a list, you know that. They have a list of coaches in their pocket. But I have also used committees, and I found them to be difficult because it took too much time. There was too much potential for leaking. And in athletics, you don't want to take too much time. Time is really an enemy. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to have premature announcements that put people in a bad position. You may have a coach who's already shook your hand, and all of a sudden the word gets out and to their school, and then it becomes very complicated all of a sudden. So you want to have a very small number of people involved to minimize the risk of leaking, and you want to do it very quickly. And a committee mitigates against both of those. Is my point.
Yeah, good point. John, would this be a factor into Maryland hiring an AD, not having a say in the basketball coach, or is it not that much of a factor?
Well, I would think it would have to be a factor at the end of the day, because you got to have that working relationship with these coaches, and particularly in this day, in this environment, I think that's probably the most important relationship that an AD needs to be focused on is what's the temperature of his coaches? Where are they? Again, it's like talent. These guys, they need to be treated differently, right? And you got to understand how that works. And again, we've seen the Del Conte-Schlossnagle relationship, and I think that's, again, if you have those types of deep ties, those things work out well. And it seems to those seem to have the appropriate alignment. And once you have that alignment, I think it's easier to breed success. So again, here's a situation where I don't know who made the decision at Maryland to do this, but it obviously happened pretty quick. So, I mean, is it some, one of their board of regents that does this? I mean, you don't know. So I think, if it were me, I wouldn't feel comfortable jumping into a situation that soon with a lot of those questions unanswered. But so that's just, again, that's me. But again, it just seems like, again, there are more questions that haven't been answered yet. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next several days and potentially weeks.
To both of you,
the buzz issue at A&M though was problematic, I thought. So I could see someone saying, I'm not in a good position here. I don't know all the pieces over here, but jumping may be the best shot for me right now to make. I could see that going through a person's mind, like a Buzz Williams, and saying, I know my situation here, which is not the best given what's happened. And I don't know everything about this, but he may be privy to more than we know. He may be privy to talking to their chancellor directly, who's the CEO of the organization, perhaps some key board members as well. There is one guy there who's paid some serious bucks for their facilities and so on. So there may be some donor involvement here too. That has happened to me more than once. I've had donors, I've had board members, I've had system leadership, weigh in on me during these processes of acquiring somebody. And when I've had to bend to that, it's usually not worked well. Mm-hmm. I can mention Kim Anderson at Missouri, a very nice guy, a decent man, played basketball for Norm Stewart, went pro for a while. He was Division III champion. Okay. Moving to D1 for him was a step too far, in my opinion. And, I thought he was a decent guy. He had all the right answers for me in terms of academics and things like that. But his recruiting was so limited to one state in a day when a major school just can't live that way. and he didn't last too long because of that. The next guy after him was a different kind of guy entirely, but good credentials, but didn't work out either. Now we have a third guy there who's maybe okay, maybe doing well. It's hard to say. He had a bad year last year, but this year was better. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I think that models vary based on the dynamics of the situation you have. I mean, the system, if you're in a system like A&M or Missouri, you got that person to worry about. The boards got to worry about them. Very few of those people will be totally hands off and say nothing to do with it. I had a former quarterback for a high school quarterback for my boss in Missouri, and I had a former college quarterback on my board. You can imagine what that was like.
Well, the other interesting thing about the Maryland situation is that their AD left too to go to SMU. So if you're looking at it, you're leaving the Big Ten, which is one of the if you're playing Monopoly, that's what is the top ones over there, Park Place, at the end of the day, and now you're going to one of the mid-level ones out there at SMU. Now, obviously, Dallas has a lot of attributes too, but that doesn't seem to pass the initial smell test. And if memory serves me correctly, isn't the guy that founded Under Armour a big Maryland booster? Maybe he's getting involved in this from a basketball program, wants to restore them to greatness. I mean, I'm not saying irrelevant, but they've been probably mediocre since they've joined the Big Ten. So this might be something that they see as a way that they can, get their program back to a level that they have the expectations to. So, as my mom always said, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but a lot of times we always think it is, and take that leap of faith. So we'll see how it all works out in the end.
It was the fiscal trouble that had Maryland move from the ACC to the Big Ten through the athletic department, and still kind of a ripple with that.
But they paid a huge fee to do that, sir. That was one of the problems. And by the time they did that, the fee had gone up a lot. And so that was a big cost to them upfront, cash on the barrelhead, basically, to do that move, with the prospect of being able to reap new revenues at a larger level from the Big Ten, which, as John said, weren't exactly realized.
And Kevin Plank, who has Under Armour, 2 years ago, that was a lot stronger. Under Armour's not in the same position now, where he is that one. He's not Phil Knight at Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay, to both y'all, because you both have hired. How do you weed out the agents who are doing this for their client to get a stronger deal where they are now, and maybe they're not really interested? Let's take Texas A&M for example. Oh, I have a client interested in A&M. Not really, just trying to make it stronger. How do you weed that out?
It's hard work. I've dealt with agents a lot, unfortunately. When we hired Kevin Sumlin, I had a term sheet in my pocket. I gave it to him. He looked at it. We shook hands. You'd think the deal is done. The agent comes on. They've got to justify their fee. He had a contract with an agent. That guy was going to get some money regardless, okay? And so it drew the whole process of getting a contract out from 1 day to 6 weeks to get a contract done. That was pretty much what the term sheet said. There was very little change because I had a term sheet that the coach had agreed to. And how do you really obviate that as an agent trying to tweak it in various ways, justifying, again, your percentage of the deal? That's a hard thing to do, but agents are part of the deal. Mm-hmm. There are coaches who will not make a decision without the agent. Therefore, you must deal with the agent. There are some coaches, and Kevin was one of those, I thought initially, who would say, I'm the boss, I'm going to make the decision, and he did it. But he didn't do it because he let the agent attack me for 6 weeks, basically. So it's a mixed bag, guys. And agents are part of the equation. And I think that a coach is likely today going to be saying, well, my agent will be the one talking to you about the contract, not me. The term sheet does not go to me, it goes to them. And let them heckle with you about it, and I get out of the room. That's probably the most common model today among the desirable coaches that are out there at a high level.
John, does it also bring in plausible deniability where the coach says, I wasn't talking to that school?
Yeah, I think that's the big reason, right? I never talked to that school. I didn't, but four of my guys in my entourage did. So again, it makes for great theater, see the coach up there. But, I think, again, it comes down to relationship, like Dr. Loftin said. If you have a relationship with said coach or know that coach from somewhere, I think it's a lot easier to have a one-on-one conversation than it is. And again, in this day and age, it seems like there are a lot of, shotgun weddings in these things, that happen when nobody gets a really chance to get to know each other. And now they find themselves, now you got to work it out after the fact. Because, again, the timing of these issues right now, unfortunately, the nature of the beast is it's very, very compressed. I mean, if you don't make a decision like this in 24 or 48 hours, and again, none of us would. I mean, it's hard for me to want to buy a washing machine without thinking about it over 48 hours. So now, if you're thinking about having to do what your future looks like, that's a very stressful time. And again, then sometimes it takes it all to, you got to figure that relationship. But if that's somewhere existed somewhere in the past, or you knew someone from wherever, it's a lot easier to have that one-on-one call. Hey, you want to come here? We want you here. We'll figure it out. Now let's turn our lawyers with your lawyers, and let's get back to getting the job done. So.
Where Indiana was a little different, right? Mike Woodson was not coming back, but the clock was still ticking for the Hoosiers, right? And sometimes you got to play a waiting game, depending on who you want. West Virginia did not advance to the NCAA, and there were hard feelings with that they did not get in. But there's that combination of you want to be quick, but sometimes you have to wait, right? Because it will put everybody in an awkward. You can't hire a sitting head coach, so to speak. You have to wait until he's knocked out or she's knocked out of her tournament. It's fascinating.
But you can have conversations leading up to that point, realizing that, that this could be an opportunity, and just would certainly like to have as many of those options available to you, so that if and when the time comes, you can move quickly because you've done your homework or your due diligence.
So coming up in the WNBA draft, a name that you will not hear is Olivia Miles, who played at Notre Dame. She has said that she is coming back to college basketball, but she is not coming back to Notre Dame. She is in the transfer portal. Dr. Loftin, we're in a brave new world, aren't we?
We are, but she's looking ahead. Maybe her agent is helping her with this as well, but she's recognizing that there's going to be a reset in 2026 with the WNBA's funding model, and that's the opportunity to deal with it better. She's probably going to get more money through an NIL deal next year
than her rookie contract. I guarantee
she would get
you that.
in a rookie contract. So why change? But she knows to get the best deal, she has to be on the market against the portal. So I understand what she's doing. She sees a year out, I've got a good shot at a really good WNBA contract. Today, I don't. If I stay where I am, I don't have the leverage to get NIL improvements I might want to kind of match that or be better than WNBA. But if I put myself in the portal, both my old school and my new school potentially get to think about it and understand what it might take to bring me to them. So I think that's where we are right now with her. And I think I give her credit. I mean, she is a very smart person saying, I want the best for me, and I'm going to make it work. I know I have an opportunity for the WNBA. The only risk she's playing is injury. That's the only risk she's playing right now, in terms of if I get injured during my last year of eligibility as a college player, maybe I won't be attracted to the WNBA. That's her risk. And she's waited, obviously, and said, I'm going to go this way. I'm okay with it.
So she doesn't have to play a second sport like John Elway or Bo Jackson, and Bo telling Hugh Culverhouse, I'm not going to Tampa. And John Elway saying, Baltimore's not on the West Coast. Right? But with NIL, this now becomes the consideration for athletes.
No. And we have other stories like that out there in football, especially, where players are saying, hey, do I want to go and be a rookie in the NFL? Or do I want to stay here or go someplace else and get this much money guaranteed to me as an NIL contract? That's an interesting decision to make right now.
And John, because they can, let's talk about the college football players, because they can talk and get information back from the league. If you know you're a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick, you can now bet on yourself to come back and to say to that school, hey, I'm a senior, I'm going to come back, the NIL deal, instead of going in and getting a chance, because later round draft picks, it's difficult to stay. If you can bet on yourself and move up, you can secure yourself a better position. Again, it's all up to the player, but that's something that can be that can work in favor of the player and the school sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, players can take insurance out now too to help, if there's a catastrophic injury, something like that, that they can guarantee them that financial security that they need. So those are expensive policies, but at the end of the day, they're probably worth it if the guy blows out his knee and never makes it to the professional levels. So it's interesting, but I do think, again, there are more people who can probably stay in school now with the NIL opportunities and make more money than if they would if they went out. I mean, surprised that Quinn Ewers opted for the draft, considering what he could have done and what he could have made, and significant money, really, and the way the NIL model was written up, he would have been in every commercial you would have seen next year.
Does it help Olivia Miles, not just her, that for the NFL, if you're coming out of college at 24, 25, that's later in an NFL career, and you don't have much of a window to contribute to your program. For Olivia Miles, 22, and she can come out at 22 years old, but with the WNBA, and then next year there's also an expansion, so there are 2 new teams that will be coming in. But that window, I don't think, is as short in the WNBA as it is, say, in the NFL, if you are an older player. I just wonder if that will be part of the thinking as well. A lot of leagues, baseball, we want you as young as we possibly can. Now, if you're going to go 3 years in college, depending on that program, you're closer to the major leagues than it was, but they love to draft the 18-year-old because we teach him our way through all of that. I wonder if that professional window is a part of it, because you want to get into the pros because that's where the real money is. It's not there yet for the WNBA. So I understand Olivia Miles, but she has a chance to play into her 30s and possibly go overseas so she can, quote unquote, give up that year that she would be in the pros, and that working in her favor. But I wonder if those become considerations for now that there's more agents in college sports.
I think they're all factors too, and I think, again, every case is probably has some individual nuances that you'd probably have to look at with the microscope to make sure they're doing the right thing. But just on the surface, I think, again, if you're a player of her caliber and staying in school another year, I think she's going to probably create more NIL sponsorships with her that will eventually carry on to the NBA or the WNBA. Caitlin Clark, all her sponsors that joined her, when she was at Iowa, I think have all followed her to the WNBA. So I think, again, she's, and she may end up back at Notre Dame too, right? She could do when this is all said and done.
Sure. Just because she's in the portal doesn't mean.
So I think, again, she's taking advantage of the way the market's set up right now, and I think she's in a great position to capitalize on it. And I hope she gets what she wants and ends up at a place where she wants, and she could probably be a difference maker for someone winning that national championship too next year. She could be the difference, and I think the Blue Bloods will probably be able to have their checkbooks out ready to go to give her a very enticing offer.
In the movie Caddyshack, Spalding Smalls famously said, "I want a cheeseburger, I want a hot dog, I want a milkshake." And Judge Schmales said, "You'll get nothing and like it. At Coastal Carolina, you'll get all of that and pay nothing and like it." Dr. Loftin, concessions are free this fall at Coastal Carolina.
Well, I paid over $19 for a beer last night at a baseball game. Okay.
Oh, that makes me hurt.
So that was a challenge. The cost of concessions is high, and there's a growing amount of, I guess, sticker shock among fans when they see the prices on their tickets going up every year. People call them, take them to coffee, beg money for donations for facility, for NIL, whatever it might be. And then you go to enjoy a game, and guess what you do? You walk out with a $150 bill for, at best, a mediocre kind of meal. So I think there is that interesting thing. Coastal Carolina, for a long time, wasn't well known. They had a few good years of football that really got them national attention. And I think they're seeing this as a way to leverage their brand identity now, which is bigger than it ever has been, probably, against a very unique thing. They're, as far as I know, the only school so far come out and say free goodies. Now, how good the hot dog is you get, sir, I won't guarantee that. How large that Coke is you're going to get, I don't want to go there either. But the idea of it being free has to have some attraction, right, John?
No, absolutely. one of the things that, if you talk to the teams that do this, particularly the major league level, when I was running Fox Sports, I'd always be curious what teams are doing and how they were, adapting to the marketplace. And you may remember they had this ticket sections where you buy a ticket, it was all you could eat, except for alcoholic beverages. And what was amazing was that they found that they were generating more money on ticket sales than they were on whatever the loss of concession was, because these fans came in and they would think, again, you can only eat so many hot dogs, at the end of the day. So again, but the fact that it was free was the motivating, mechanism to make that fan want to come to those games. So they ended up expanding those, and other teams have probably done it too, expanding those free concession areas where those fans come. For a family of 4. What a great way to feed the kids. So I do think, again, kudos for them. A hot dog doesn't cost that much. What you're giving back, I think they will probably easily make an additional ticket sales just because of the uniqueness, and I think fans will want to take advantage of that opportunity.
If the guy's name is Joey, don't sell him a ticket. That's all I can say. Nathan's will not like you. What do you eat? 75, 80 hot dogs? Okay, so there are a few like that.
There's always going to be someone who comes and that will mess up that process. But I think at the end of the day, they're fine with that, and that becomes a great social media viral when somebody's out there. This is my 52nd hot dog at the all-you-can-eat day. How much have they cost the team that night? But they'll get more back in the social media value of that post getting out there too. So,
Andrew, just send Trev a note telling him about Coastal Carolina as a hint. Maybe he'll do the same thing for Texas A&M.
It's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit, but again, there you could put a section up there, those hard to sell seats, and you can buy a ticket up there, and that also includes an all you can eat option up there.
Schools all benchmark one another, and they see what they're doing. Correct? And they'll be keeping an eye on all of that. That's for sure. It's similar to what I think Arthur Blank did it for the Falcons, a reduced price menu, and Phoenix, I think, just did it. Very reduced priced, again, for the opportunity of families being there. But
but again, it generates it generates a lot of interest. Fans will go.
Here we are in April, right? And you thought it was an April Fool's joke, didn't you? When it was posted on social media, and it wasn't. But here we are. We're talking about Chanticleer football on April 1st. It worked. Yeah, it's already worked for them, right?
No, and that's a beautiful campus if you've never been there. That's a great place to go.
We might have to do one of our shows from there.
We do. We should go the Chanticleers. I love it. That's a great name too.
I'm going to fly in John's private jet. Okay.
I'll try to get your bags free on Southwest the next time we travel together.
Thank you.
Dr. Loftin, Jon Heidtke, thank you so much. This was a very fun episode, number 74. And we thank you so much for joining us. For Nick Savage, Richard Zane, thank you for helping us out as well. I'm Andrew Monaco. We'll see you on the next edition of College Sports. Follow the money. So long, everybody.